The theme of the panel discussion is about the impact of bioenergetic analysis on the culture and the culture's impact on bioenergetics. In other words, how the spirit of the age influenced Al's work. I think this is a very interesting question. So let's move forward to these questions by starting with a short introductory statement of each of the panelists. I would like to make you first familiar with our colleague and friend from Wellington, New Zealand, Gary Cockburn. He was the inaugural president of the New Zealand Society for Bioenergetic Analysis. Most of you got him to know as a keynote speaker at the Seville conference in 2007, and also I thought through his publication in the IIBA journal. Gary, please tell us a little bit about the development of bioenergetic analysis in New Zealand and tell us how cultural aspects impacted bioenergetic analysis and maybe vice versa. Please, Gary.
Thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Hugo. I'd like to start with the second part of the question. How does the culture impact on bioenergetics? And I'd like your permission to impact on you in terms of the Maori culture of New Zealand. So I'm going to start with a formal Maori welcome. Kia hiwaroa, kia hiwaroa. Be alert, be on your feet. Kamati, kamati, ka ora, ka ora. There is death, there is death. There is life, there is life. Tihe Mauriora. Breathe. It is the life force. Te nakwe te whenua. Greetings, Mother Earth, on whom we stand. Te nakwe te wharanui. Greetings, this great house, whose body and spirit envelops us and holds us in your heart. Haere Rā, Alex Lowen, Rangatira Mā, Tōtara Nui, Haere Rā, Haere Rā, Haere Rā Pamamau. Farewell, Alex Lowen. Farewell, my chief. Farewell, the giant totara of the forest. Farewell, as you journey to your ancestors in a far-off land. Te Nakwe Scott, Rangatira Mā, our leader. Tēnā koutou, nā awhina, tēnā koutou rangatira. Greetings to the elders, the older women and the older men of our institute and the members of the faculty. Te nakwe hori. Hello, George, and thank you for your words. Te nakwe e hoa. Hello, my friends on the panel. Tēnā koutou manuhiri nā hau e whā, and welcome to everyone who have come from the four winds of the earth. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings, thrice greetings, greetings to you all. I think you can see in that greeting that the indigenous culture of New Zealand is very much grounded in the earth, on their feet, I didn't do the kamati that you may have seen the All Blacks doing, but it's sort of really powerful stuff, you know. They're really in their bodies. It's really embodied action. I'm privileged to be here from New Zealand, and I'd like to thank the members of the New Zealand Society of Bioenergetic Analysis for financially supporting me to come to New Zealand, and that is their contribution to this gathering. New Zealand, as you may know, is about as far away from New York as it's possible to be on Earth. And I want to assure you that bioenergetics is alive and flourishing in New Zealand. I'd like to pay a special tribute to Eleanor Greenlee. Eleanor, like a bioenergetic missionary, came to New Zealand twice, in 1989 and 1990, and ran workshops in New Zealand, of which I attended. Thank you, Eleanor. And I'd also like to acknowledge Feral Irvine, who, with Eleanor's support, emigrated from Chicago to New Zealand, and Feral has asked me to pass on her love to all her former colleagues and her friends. Without that love of bioenergetics and love of our Lowen by these two women, bioenergetics would not exist in the South Pacific. Thank you, Eleanor. I also need to express the gratitude of the New Zealand Society to Michael Maley, our coordinating trainer for two trainings, and to all the trainers who took that 12-hour trip from LAX to New Zealand. And at this time, I'd also like to express my own personal debt to David Finlay, who lived in New Zealand for 3 years, helping us to set up the society. And sadly, David died 1 year ago on the 6th of April, 2 days away. The embodiment of bioenergetics in the New Zealand context has not been easy. Only 3 of us ever had the privilege of meeting our Lowen, and many of our members have had to make do with stories about him and reading his books. New Zealand, like Australia and the United Kingdom, has its own English intellectual traditions and can be overtly resistant to ideas originating in the United States. For instance, several influential New Zealanders studied with Gerda Boyson in London in the early 80s and brought back an English Reichian and I think somewhat anti-Lowenian perspective to New Zealand. Historically in New Zealand, the wider psychotherapy field has been strongly influenced by English Freudian, Kleinian and object relations ideas until some key people came to the United States and studied self-psychology. There are also small schools of Gestalt, TA, Jungian analysis and psychodrama, and there's now a more pluralistic environment enhanced with the migration of some talented Psycho-African psychotherapists who've been very much trained in a phenomenological approach. The cultural renaissance of the indigenous Maori people over the past 30 years and their holistic ideas on the interpenetration of body, mind, spirit, and the earth, the grounding of our whole being, of our whole spiritual, physical being in the earth, is really quite something. And there's also a strong emphasis on social justice. There's a talk about just therapy. Just therapy is not just therapy. Just therapy is one that has an element of social justice within it. And there's an exciting interface between bioenergetics and the Maori world. We've worked hard in New Zealand in the 18 years since Eleanor first came, and I believe we've established the credibility of bioenergetics in the New Zealand context. From January this year, the government has required all psychotherapists, if you want to be called a psychotherapist, you have to be registered with the Psychotherapy Board of New Zealand. And we were successful in getting the CBT and the international curriculum accepted by the New Zealand Psychotherapy Board. So we're right up there with all the other. I'd like to make a few wider cultural observations. It seems to me that in the Western world, the wider cultural imperative since the time of the Enlightenment has been to find a solid foundation for understanding and explaining how we know ourselves as subjects and how we know the world. The postmodern world has lost its bearing in that quest, and we're at a time where, critically, you could say there's no longer any substance to our subjectivity. Our culture has reduced itself to a thin digital, disembodied sensory experience of instant enlightenment and pleasure. Come in, L. Lowen, the Descartes of the body. I continue to be amazed at the power of Al's insight that you are your body is you. And Ed was talking about that, and several people talked about that phrase yesterday. His idea is muscular, it's immediate, and it's irresistible. With his formidable intellectual clarity and his force of character, he was able to elaborate that idea as George has so wonderfully laid out for us today, and all those, both the simple and the complex model. Bioenergetics is the world's largest school of somatic psychotherapy, and that, I think, reflects what George was saying today about Al's power of communication. He's provided us with a psychological and philosophical foundation in our quest for knowledge of ourselves, our own subjectivity, and knowledge of the world. I think we would make a mistake if we tried to replicate in our own cultural context the certitude and the immediacy that Al found for himself and more importantly, found for us in his love of the body. He was a trailblazer who was gifted with the vision to see the body and the self directly. That came through yesterday in many of the speakers. I think Leslie was talking about that. Some other people were talking about that. Al's ability to see in this integrated way, in depth, that no one else could see. He was gifted that way. That was his gift. I suspect that for most of us, the task is much more of a struggle, and that's how it should be. We do need to be suspicious of an easy certitude, and we need to recover the richness of Al's legacy by the hard work of acknowledging the indirect status of the self, the difficulties we have in the immediate access to our bodies, and in the otherness of the embodied self. And that's relating to what George was saying about one of the tasks we have in terms of the relational aspect of bioenergetics. And we all need to do that in our own cultural context. I'd just like to finish with a quote from Hegel. Hegel noted that the great men of history bear witness to vitality and open up ways to further development. He said that their passion gives them life and their fate kills them. Now, while it may be true of some great men that their fate killed them, it's not true of Lowen, not at 98. Lowen's fate is that his spirit and his passion for the body lives on in all of us. And that will be handed down down the generations, and that's what we're celebrating today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I ask you to be patient with me, because a panel discussion should be a discussion. But since, given the technical possibilities we have here, it is better that we listen first to the statement of each of the panelists. Otherwise, it becomes too complicated. So I hope you understand this. I would like now to introduce to you a panelist coming from Sao Paulo, Marcia Barreto. Marcia is a clinical psychologist, director of the Instituto de Analisi Bioenergética do Sao Paulo, and a Board of Trustee member. Marcia was so nice to spontaneously substitute Liani Singh, who was on your program but who couldn't come. I guess Marcia is willing, mirroring somehow her master's voice. Don't you, Marcia?
Good morning. It is an honor to be here, speaking, sharing with you some thoughts, some ideas that I have developed with Liani Singh. As many people here know, Liani was one of the most important persons in bioenergetic in Brazil. She was the one of the people who introduced bioenergetic in Brazil, and a very active woman in our society. Bioenergetics arrived in Brazil in a very special moment, after the fall of the military regime in the 80s, times of closing, times of a rigid perspective, times of a lot of fear. Until then, we were Reichian, fighting against overwhelming power of psychoanalysis. We were outsiders. Our movement was big, but unorganized. We didn't have many books nor models. We were sauvage. We were in a period of an openness and of a discovery of a lot of things, but without a skin, without a structure, without a frame to organize us. Bioenergetics organized us and focused our efforts. We felt we could hope to become respected of having bodies connected to our heads. Dr. Lowen visited Brazil for the first time in 1989, when an institute had already been organized in São Paulo. After the visit, many other institutes were founded in the north and in the south of the country. And Brazil is a huge country. We have big differences between the different areas, cultural differences between the different areas. When we talk about São Paulo, we are talking about a cosmopolitan city, a big city. When we are talking about the north of the country, we talk about very sometimes poor areas. So we have different cultures, different music, different expressions all around the country, and different societies growing during this period. They grew and developed, each in a peculiar local culture with such a large country. Virginia's arrival in the 90s and organized us as a federation. This is a very, very important experience to us. We have a very strong federation that organized us, that integrated us. We feel really like a body. We have this sense of a body. Last meeting in São Paulo, we experienced a real moment of dialogue, exchanging ideas, exchanging perspectives, thinking together about our future in Brazil, facing all this crisis that is going on. Together, we managed to expand and strengthen bioenergetics in Brazil. We had searched for an international model of a healthy and well-balanced human being, and this American school was providing it to us. Brazilian body language is very expressive, and we started to focus it. We had no difficulties or barriers in doing the exercises. We had no barriers regarding touching. And being touched, since touching is not regarded as intrusive in our culture. Sometimes we shock people when we travel around the world because we hug, we kiss, we are kind of strange doing these things. What shocked us at the beginning was the stress and the pain that bioenergetic exercise brought with them in pursuing surrender. Crying, anger, strong touches made us act out sometimes. In a country that values the search of pleasure in dancing and sport, pain was ill accepted. We were multi-sized for that. And we had a group in Rio Ipanema Beach that regularly made bioenergetic grounding exercise without causing any kind of surprise to the passerbys. We are an anthropophagic culture which is used to absorbing all possible teachings and transforming them according to our culture acceptance. We are creating more and more structured areas regarding organization. We had in different societies in Brazil programs that aim to prepare the participants to work inside organizations using bioenergetic analysis, the concepts and the exercises, the techniques. We have doing a lot of this. And in Brazil, we have the same profile when we think about executives as we have in other parts of the world, but they are really open and willing to understand what we are talking about and how they can connect all these thoughts to the strategic thinking of the organization. Another important field for us is education. We have been thinking a lot about integrating our institutes with the academy, with the scientific institutions that are run in Brazil. So we have right now a lot of people doing their master degrees, their doctorate degrees, and joining us and exchanging with us, and we are doing this kind of interchange, interconnection with this field. Community work. We have, as I told you, a lot of needs in our societies that can be fulfilled with our thoughts, with our principles, with our way of seeing life. And we have been bringing this in social clinic, in work with community, in different areas of the country, in different societies, and we have been exchanging that. Students went to get in touch with the visitors in our Congress, in the last Congress, and feel belonging to international group. This is very, very important to us because we have, not exactly now, but we came from an experience where we used to feel like third world, like a separate area of the society. And now we are living, we are experiencing a new moment, and when we feel much more integrated to the first world, and our students are willing to exchange and to see what our professionals are doing in different countries. So this international perspective is very, very, very important and very valued by us. Going to the 20th Congress in Búzios that we are going to develop this year, we acquire more exchange and share undertone. In Brazil, bioenergetics now is familiar and accepted. We grew up and we are growing. We are willing to develop our work. We are willing to open our doors to people from different areas to exchange. And as George was saying, to try to expand our activities in different fields in order to integrate the past, the experience, the tradition with the future, with innovation. That is our thought that we would like to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. Our speaker come back from South America to North America. So I would like to introduce to you Jim Elniski. Jim lives and works in Chicago, where he has a private bioenergetic therapy practice. He is a local trainer and former director of the Chicago Society. Jim is also, and I'm sure this part of Jim will help us to develop our topic, Jim is also a practicing artist and associate professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. His special interest as therapist, as clinical consultant, as educator, and artist is the pulsatory nature of being alive and how we contact, how we shape and how we are shaped by the world around us. I welcome Jim.
Well, thanks for having me, giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of this memorial to Al Lowen. Okay. My deepest experiences of being alive and connected with those I care for and work with are those times and those moments when I feel, in Al Lowen's words, and has been recited innumerable times this last couple days, the life of the body, and his consistent appreciation and respect for the mystery of life's movement. And I think I did some simple arithmetic. I think I'm a fourth generation bioenergetic therapist, maybe fifth, maybe third, somewhere along those. And and I came to bioenergetics already having established myself as an artist, and I found in Lowen's writing, it really was through his writing that I found bioenergetics, that it was the simplicity and the directness of his commentary and of his thoughts and of his theory that really allowed me to engage with the world of the energetic flow of life itself. And I'm even aware of that these days as on the faculty at the School of the Art Institute, where I'm known in the institution as being the one who knows about bioenergetics. And I typically get at least 3 or 4 referrals from faculty members who are working with graduate students in the studio arts to come to talk to me because of their having read Lowen and being interested in exploring further in relationship to their work the energetic aspects of life. And I think in some ways one of the things that Al Lowen has given us is a way of accepting the invitation of what I heard this said by an elder friend of mine a while back. He said, Jim, what life is? Life is merely an invitation to be alive. And in all of my years of working with Lowen's principles and as a therapist and as an educator, that he has mapped out ways for all of us to accept that invitation. And I see that reverberated culturally as well as therapeutically. One of the ways that this bridges into a larger cultural context is, and I'll just give you one brief example. Last fall, I was asked to be a resident artist for a division of the Harlem Children's Zone here in Central Harlem. And it was a division called TRUCE, which is an acronym for the Renaissance University for Community Education. And their mission is to educate and empower youth to become agents of positive personal and social change through the arts, academics, and activism. And I just want to share with you just one of the projects that I did with them that I think I would not have done if it wasn't for my having been impacted and influenced and shaped by Al Lowen's thoughts. And this had to do with aspirations. Basically what I did is with some students, we collected the breath of the residents of the Harlem community, both the students, the youth, parents, staff, teachers, and we had about 500. We collected 500 breaths and long balloons, and each breath was a representation of something that each of those individuals aspire to. And to aspire is to long for, aim, or seek ambitiously, to strive toward a desired end. But it also refers to making a pronouncement with a strong exhalation of breath. And if there's one thing that Lowen has given to me, is room to breathe. And through him and through the many trainers, therapists, and the like that I've worked with. And so the breath collection was an opportunity to record and display people's search for something great or something they consider of high value. And so with these students, we tied people's breath together into a communal breathing form and projected onto the wall in that room also the text of the aspirations that each individual had. So that, I mean, just to give you a quick glimpse, snapshot of how Lowen's thoughts and his writings and his work has reverberated through the culture. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Now we move forward to Europe, and I'm glad to introduce to you Dr. Patrizia Moselli. Patrizia is a faculty member of the IIBA, director of the Italian Society of Bioenergetic Analysis, and president of the Italian Federation of Psychotherapy Association. You see a politically much powerful woman, a real leader in our field. Patrizia, what do you want to tell us about the culture's impact on bioenergetic, especially in Italy?
Okay, thank you, Ugo. I feel very emotional, so maybe it's not as, I will not be as Ugo presented me. But anyway, I want just to say that last 23 of December, I was busy to buy presents for my family, and I was in a shop. I did those things always at the last moment, and the phone ring, and I said, oh, the phone. And then there was Bill White, and I said, hello, Patrizia, how you doing? Will be willing to come and speak for the Lowen Memorial? And I breathed, and then it was the best gift for me and for my society, of course. So really, I want to thank you, Bill White, and all the committee to invite me, because I feel like bioenergetics is my family, and it's been also a way to escape by my real family and save me by my real family. And I think for that reason I put all my energy also, that I want to give back something that I received, of course. And I think that is a reality of many people in Italy that are doing bioenergetics. And I also want to share something that is very important, because I heard many, also I was very touched by the letter Fred Lowen wrote to us, and he said that he hoped that bioenergetic will become a mainstream, and I want to say that at least in Italy we achieved that goals. We are considered a mainstream in Italy, no doubt about it, and then I want to share with you also. And I always ask to myself how that's happening, because I'm a curious person, so I like to also speculate about phenomena. And I think that's many reasons. One, we have to be thankful to Al Lowen that came in Italy with his presence, his brightness, his clarity. He opened the roots to be appreciated by the culture, that the Italian culture is not so easy, then it will not accept many people. And he came and he did a lecture with a very small but selected group of clinical psychologists and psychiatrists, and they just like him, loving him, and through the work of Ezio Mazzini Zucconi, that is not anymore in our society, but he was a builder, with Luisa Parmigiani, that is still in our society, that was another builder, and with a lot of work of Gabriella Buti Zaccagnini, that I want to also acknowledge now and give a big love and memory for her, because she was another big builder of our society. And I want to acknowledge also another person that came here, is the generation, the other generation that helped us to build our society, that is Maria Luisa Versa, that came here from Italy and just honor Lowen. I want also to thank, because I'm very proud of that, 10 people, 11 people actually, of our society came just to honor Alexander Lowen and the IBA community. So that is a big release for me, because I feel that we can do all of that because we are together. We feel we have a lot of conflict, we fight a lot, but when we have to bring bioenergetics in the other world, I would say, we are together and we feel that that is our goal. And that is something that I want to share about our experience, because I think it's very, it's work for us. Work for us, because I think we, in a sense, really take a message that I think is very important about bioenergetics and what Lowen teaches us about self-possession. That is, for me, was also, when you talk about self-possession, there was very little to talk about empowerment, but it really was talking also about that, to give the individual the power to express themselves in all the different way and shape that the individual want to be. And that's what we try to achieve in Italy. We are, in our society, there is room for strong bioenergetics. I really thanks George Downing for to say that, because I think that is a very big heritage that we have it. We don't have to deny it, because otherwise we will become like many other body psychotherapy, and we have a really strength. But there is also a lot of room for relational bioenergetic, for more soft bioenergetic, for work with the other kind of special population. So we try to have all inside of us. I want also to acknowledge our first training that came to us, and they help us to build our school. And so I want to thank especially the two people that are here, Eleanor and Bill White, but also Jim, of course, that is not anymore with us, and Renato, and all the other trainers that came after them, because I think they help us to structure our school that now is recognized and is in the same level of any other school. That's why we think we are in the mainstream. The fact that I'm the president of Italian Association for Psychotherapy speaks that we are not neglected in a small place of not either humanistic psychotherapy. We are in Italy, that's our reality. We are equal in every other approach. I think we have a lot to do on that. So that's why I appreciate a lot the talk of George Downing, because I think we believe in that. And so we are part of the board or director of a review that put together article of any school mainstream in Italy. And for example, in the neuroscience book that was editing, we put Angela Klospek article with another of Nicoletta Sciatti. So every time we think of that, we have a lot to do. We never go to the other world thinking guilty because we are bioenergetics, that I already said to Siviglia, but the big, I think, heritage and legacy that we took by Alexander Lowen is like that we go out to the world and we are proud to be bioenergetics in Italy, and that's work. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you Helen Risneck-Sun, a philosophical doctor and licensed psychologist in private practice in Santa Cruz, California. Helen led training groups in California, Canada, and New Zealand. She also taught classes at the University of California and San Francisco, and she has published papers in various psychology journals, including articles on shame and sexuality, false memories, transference tests, and trauma. Helen, please tell us how bioenergetic analysis influenced you in person. What was the forming energy which shaped your professional life?
Well, in 5 minutes or less, yes, it did. I want to thank you all for inviting me. Really enjoyed the talk this morning. So, it all started, I think, in around 1967. I was an undergraduate at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. I heard rumors from my best friend, a math major, about a therapy called bioenergetics that was happening, of course, on the West Coast. It involved taking off your clothes and breathing. It wasn't until 13 years later, when I was living in the mountains of Northern California, that my older brother, a lawyer, gave me, the psychologist, a name for this psychotherapy, bioenergetics, and he informed me that I needed to try it. There was an announcement in the newspaper of the American Psychological Association advertising a weekend workshop with Michael Conant in Berkeley. I attended that weekend, and I was intrigued with the promise of truly knowing oneself. I think other people have talked about that. What followed was a lifetime exploration enhanced and supported by some of the most intelligent and gifted therapists I have encountered. I say this after having attended 2 of the top psychology graduate schools and completed numerous trainings in trauma and psychoanalytic psychotherapy. I want to particularly thank Eleanor Greenlee, who taught me about the real body, one of muscles, bones, and blood. And special thanks to Virginia Hilton, who mentored and encouraged me just as I was drifting away from bioenergetics in my practice. She was elected president of the new institute. Having such a thoughtful, grounded person at the helm legitimized my practice so that I didn't feel so isolated and alone when asking people to lie down, to open and close their legs, hit with tennis rackets, and all of the other strange things we engage in and as bioenergetic analysts. I also want to thank 3 people who are no longer with us. Jim Miller, who developed a bioenergetic community at Whistler and invited me to give a major address while I was still a trainee. David Finley for his bright and creative mind, his guidance, and his love. Bob Jocks and Tim Scott, who is not dead as far as I know, for organizing the conferences at Black Butte, where we were encouraged to write papers incorporating psychoanalytic theories, primarily relational, into the theory and practice of bioenergetics. And I also want to thank Sylvia Conant, who is reading everything and training in every body intervention there is. Being her friend has been a gift of laughter, love, and intellectual bountiness. And I think it really supports my practice to have a friend like that. I live in an isolated little community. And finally, I want to thank my husband just because it is an opportunity to do so, and because he has loved me all these years. But the real reason we are here today is that a great man, Al Lowen, died. He was charismatic, intelligent, passionate, a truly great thinker and writer, and although not a particularly related person, he attracted the kind of intelligent and creative group of people, some of who you see here today. And the bottom line is that Al Lowen practiced and lived his ideas. He was, as they say, the real deal. He accomplished something that had never been done before, and even though it looks simple, the brilliance of his theory is in its simplicity. By describing the functional unity of the body-mind, he provided operational definitions. Operational definitions are very important in psychology. They say that what I'm describing in theory also exists and can be described in the outside world. Now, that's pretty easy if you're describing a chair. But he gave operational definitions to concepts like grounding, energy, aliveness, depression, and gave them a physical description that matched their imagistic, metaphorical, and cognitive counterparts. In this sense, he was a true behavioral psychologist. In the language of the body, he described the muscular and energetic components, color, breath, contact, warmth of different emotions and emotional defenses. He also outlined, I believe, the developmental, relational environment in which these processes occurred, emphasizing the first 3 years of life. Many of his theories and descriptions of various attachment styles and consequences are now being validated by neuroscientific research. His analysis of the body's defense responses have been elaborated and developed in theories of trauma and therapeutic interactions for the treatment of trauma. Also, somatic schools of psychotherapy have been developed in the United States, for example, Hakomi, family systems therapy, without ever acknowledging that the theoretical basis for their system is straight out of bioenergetics. Al's passing generated many reactions, some of which you have heard these couple of days. I had a series of intense email communications with Bob Lewis recently, and in the process of those interchanges, I began to remember the few times that I spent with Al. Let me tell you about such a time. I think, like many of us, I like to feel in control of my reactions, which is why I especially like grounding and the concrete way that Al talks about grounding. It calms me, and I feel more in control. During one session with Al, he did everything he could to unground me, kicking my legs out from under me and aggressively charging at me. It was at dinner after that session in which I was having a difficult time managing the intense sexual charge and longing that he had opened. He sat down next to me, looked me in the eyes, and said, "You can't control this through will." My thought at the time, although I didn't say it to him, was that if I don't control this with my will, I'll end up in jail for having too much fun, for being lewd and lascivious, arrogant and manipulative, and downright obnoxious. I couldn't imagine any other possibility than control. Now, I think we live in a synchronous universe. I don't expect thunder and lightning like Bob Lewis got during his talk, but I have my own little synchronicity going on. When something significant happens which affects your mind-body to its core. Just after being invited to speak on this panel, a client emailed me this quote. He said that what Lowen wrote about the concept of will struck him deeply. Now listen to these words. Lowen gives concrete references to abstract terms so that we are impacted and know their deepest meaning. Here is the quote. Every painful situation is an emergency to which a person reacts via the sympathetic adrenal system by increasing his state of tension and hypertonicity in the muscles as they prepare to act. The heightened consciousness involves an active engagement of the will. In an emergency, an individual doesn't act spontaneously. Every action is a calculated move designated to remove the danger, end quote. This came out of the book Pleasure, which I found the most difficult book to read. I now think I'm beginning to know why. And not until my client brought me this quote did I really understand what Al was trying to tell me that evening. We can't truly be open to the streaming of energy, and I have had the experience of surrendering to that wonderful sensation, albeit for brief times, but then again, they are always way too brief. But my real point is that will is not an abstract, fuzzy concept. He explains how will appears in the body as hypertonicity in the muscles, a heightened consciousness, and I would include self-consciousness. Al showed the way by writing in such clear, embodied, operational, knowable terms how to find ourselves. My fear is, and my hope that this does not happen, it is work will be either disappear into other theories and no longer be truly bioenergetics. And like the mist of Avalon, it will be a heroic legend talked about, but just that, a myth. Its true impact and knowledge forgotten. That is my fear. So I continue to expand my knowledge and practice of bioenergetics, bringing in the relational aspects, the new information from trauma theories, but never forgetting Al's gift to reach and extend, to ground and know what we do in the physical world that can be experienced and known in the concrete reality of our body cells. I thank you all.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you all for your patience. First to listen to all these statements, and now we have the masterpiece, how we get involved with each other. I was informed by Patricia that you want to add something, and please take your time, maybe with this microphone.
I forgot. I just want to, it's okay like that? I just want to add that in Italy, the death of Al Lowen was also received like he was one of the last master of psychotherapy that was alive and left us. And I think that is important also to underline, because sometimes we forgot that there are not so many people like there were when there was, as Al started, there was Rogers, there were Fritz Perls, and all those masters almost died. And so one other thing that is important, that the memorial of Al Lowen was done in the University of Milano, because there was that recognition that he was a master in psychotherapy, and the municipality of Rome will do next 15th of May a Memorial Day, will see the contribution of Lowen in the education and prevention of health. And I think we have to go in that direction to be really acknowledge that he was a master, he is not anymore. And so of course, we push, we talk with the municipality, we see his book are being published in many languages, and then we contact the people that are, and they want us to train the teacher of elementary school and pre-elementary school in body, we call it that we do body education. That means for us, what means body education means education to affettività, come si dice? Affectiveness, so emotional education. And so I think that's also something that I forgot when I was, that I want to share with you.
Okay, thank you, Patricia, for these addings. Now I would like to invite all the panelists, if one wants to refer to George's talks or to one of the statements, please feel welcomed. Please, the microphone to Gary.
I think Patricia has made a really important point about sort of like the masters have gone. And I really want to refer back to George's talk in terms of the possible agenda that's been set out. And, you know, it's really, I think what you set out for us, George, had a resonance and a connection that really excited me in terms of, yeah, I want to try and keep doing some of those things. So the masters have gone, but the task rests with each of us. And I'd just like to thank you, George, for laying out those points. And I'd be interested in your thoughts about that phenomenon, really, in terms of like the masters have gone and where are we now, and how do you see the future of psychotherapy from that point of view? I don't know if that...
Well, I don't know quite what to say to that, Gary. If I think about that generation, I think it's quite fascinating how of that older group, it's especially Gestalt therapy and bioenergetics, which still remain the most known, respected, widely disseminated sets of ideas. And certainly, if you compare the Pearl's legacy and Al's legacy, there's a much more coherent legacy from Al, both in terms of the writings themselves and in an institutional sense, by far.
Well, just to follow up a little bit on what you had talked about, George, was that it seems to me that. Thank you. Okay. It seems to me that, I mean, one of the things that I was aware that you were doing was you were identifying a moving center versus a fixed core, and
you have to put it right up against your mouth.
Okay, how's that?
Yes.
Hello. That I thought that you were identifying a moving center versus a fixed core, and that it was that moving center that we could really move with in terms of identifying what bioenergetics could be.
You know, there's some. You know what I liked about your talk. I just joined a consultation group of analytic therapists, and they were talking about anger, and very surprised how when their clients got angry, they seem more healthy, and that's so Lowenian. The organizing part of the aggression, how much it organizes in your body. And I think I was hearing your talk just elucidating those little parts that are so so hidden that in the theory that we experience in the exercises. We have the exercises of grounding and hitting. We see people be able to reach in a more organized fashion, but it's never really, the theory of putting that together is implicit. It's never really been explicated, and I really liked your talk just because they were just fascinated when I started talking about how organizing anger can be and why their clients choose anger.
Well, thank you for that comment, Helen. It's interesting what you say. You know, Al, from the time of language of the body, always used the term aggression a great deal, not just anger, but aggression. That was a very special meaning for him, and it was very positive. So when he talked about using love with aggression, he didn't mean getting anger in your sex life, but he meant forcefulness. He really meant forcefulness, and there's something about this core element of forcefulness that was constantly a theme for him, and I think the emotion of anger. I think we'd all agree here that for Al, and that it's so. In reality, the emotion of anger can cause trouble, or it can be good, and it can be both together. But the good and helpful side has to do with this mobilizing of forcefulness.
Yes. First, I want to thank you for your for your speech. It was so clear, so easy to reach the ideas, and it made me think about a lot of things. In one moment, you touched the idea, the issue that for Lowen, you don't have to think only about the awareness, being aware about the body, but the idea was to have a real transformation. And this touched me a lot because I have been working in different fields. I have my private practice, and I also work with organizations. And inside organizations, we don't have this opportunity. So I would like, from your experience, what do you think about this idea of bringing those concepts and bringing this experience in a different level? And we have been doing this inside organization, but also in our social clinic, because we work with the focused model. Bioenergetic focused is a therapy that happens in a 1 year perspective. The clients stay with us during 1 year, and we work with a focus. So I would like to hear a little bit, what do you think about this idea of bringing this concept in a different level, in a different channel of possibility in terms of transformation? And how do you connect this with these 4 steps that you mentioned in terms of the development of bioenergetics in the world?
Well, Marta, it's a lovely question, and I really don't know what to say in terms of trying to bring ideas of bioenergetics to institutions. For sure, you know a lot more about it than I do. In terms of applying, getting at bioenergetic principles and concepts in social settings in the sense of helping individuals how to use their body strategies and so on in different ways in interactional settings. There are, I think, interesting ways to supplement the classic bioenergetic ways, and one of the most interesting is with videotape, where you can look at interaction from the outside. So when we work in the classic ways here, we work from the inside. But if you think about it, thanks to infant research and a lot of other forms of research with videotape, it's possible today to also get a very interesting perspective on how people organize body and interaction from the outside. So here's an additional channel of information which can be used with the person, look at it, and be used as information by the therapist or the counselor or whoever's facilitating this kind of work. And so in some clinical institutional settings where there's an important emphasis on building up new interactional possibilities, here's one window that can be opened.
I leave the word now to Scott. For sure, we would have a lot of questions. I also had ones, if I think yesterday in Vivian's talk, when she referred to the 50s, which impact had the constricting time of the 50s, which impact had the political situation in Europe when Reich developed his, his character analysis. I would have questions when Helen referred to the 60s, when she hear about the therapy taking off clothes. What has this to do with the flower power generation? Is there an influence in it? What does it mean, the back to basic development? Was this only an authorian conflict with Al, or was this maybe also a try to set again some boundaries? We don't know, but maybe we can continue this discussion, and Scott, our new president, has to say something now. Thank you all.